Welcome back. Dobrodošli nazad. We really hope that speed dating was inspiring and that you had a chance to have many interesting conversations and meet new people and kind of get a taste of what mentorship looks like. Of course, it's much more kind of focused, calm. You don't have to yell a lot, at least as much as you had there. So give it a try also after the conference. But now we go back in here for a more structured conversation. And because creative mentorship in its core has this idea to support the field of culture, also field of kind of journalism and education, and professionals that work in that field and that kind of try to offer their best and contribute to society in many different ways by working in the cultural field specifically. So this is where creative mentorship grew from. This is still the biggest part of our community of alumni, both mentees and mentors. And this is why we felt it really makes sense now, 12 years on, since the start of creative mentorship, to kind of have this panel and to steer this discussion. What does mentorship do in culture? Like, what does it have to do with culture? And there's been, of course, many, many things that mentorship can contribute to in the field of culture. Over the years, we've been collecting these evaluation forms very meticulously as a creative mentorship team. And there's always these topics of, well, professional support in one's own journey. There's always these topics of very personal support that hasn't been expected, but is always there somehow. It's always this topic of meeting people who think alike and do alike, not in the sense that we are all the same in creative mentorship, but in a sense that kind of professionalism, knowledge, dedication, some commitment to society and social issues is really what connects people in creative mentorship. And that's why this panel together. I'm really, really happy that I'm moderating a panel with these four ladies and with these four great mentors and mentees and great cultural professionals. First to my left is Professor Dr. Milena Dragićević Šešić, who is really an unavoidable figure, unavoidable being to whomever wants to deal with culture, not only in Serbia, but across the world. And if you have any kind of sense for critical thinking, for thinking like what culture can do for the wider society and so on, you have to come across Milena's thoughts, Milena's lectures, and also Milena's mentorship, and that's interesting to kind of go back to later. Then Helene Larsson Pousette, that you saw was formally inaugurated as the mother of creative mentorship, or the Kuma, we could say, but someone who has had a very inspiring career as a cultural professional, from curator to cultural attaché and diplomat, to someone who really likes to present herself as a facilitator, kind of a person who likes to connect people and steer new things coming from those unexpected connections, and yeah, mentoring being one of them. Then Ivana Jovanović Arsić, who works both with kind of foreign cultural relations and is kind of an ambassador here of Cervantes Institute, the Spanish Cultural Center operating in Belgrade. But at the same time, that's not enough. So she's also, for years already, active as a kind of one of the founders and members of organization Culturis, a non-governmental organization that deals a lot with kind of knowledge sharing, especially in the domain of libraries and kind of these reading cultures and supporting libraries a lot. But also a person who is now sitting in the governing board of the Association of Independent Cultural Scene. So kind of really someone who has this overview to the independent cultural scene on this table. And then Nela Tonković, who is an art historian and curator, very dedicated and very passionate in that, in kind of art and what art can do in public space. For a long time being the curator and the director of the Contemporary Gallery in Subotica, director of the National Museum in Šabac, or the City Museum in Šabac, and then is again working at the gallery in Subotica. And we'll see how mentorship has played a role in these paths, but also someone who is at the moment one of us in this room kind of also active in the field of, well, alternative politics, politics in the sense of trying to really engage as a professional in a committed way to kind of help create some better political culture in this country. So these are all the hats that we have here, and there's many more, of course, within each of these people. But I would really like us to start with just keywords. Like when you hear mentorship, what comes first to your mind? And maybe we can, Nela, starting from...
Actually, it's not something I thought of, but I saw this one paper with the word support on it. So that would be support for me. And if I needed to explain that in one sentence, then I would have to borrow the words of a very young boy who wrote something on that paper, and he wrote, "That's when mom and dad say bravo." So support and bravo.
Yes, for me it's also support, but it's also knowledge transfer, and it's also horizontality in the work, which is really important.
And for me, I think it's trust, because without trust, we cannot have a crucial conversation. So I think trust in yourself and trust in the other person, I think that is crucial.
For me, it's commitment, inspiration, and energy transfer, in fact, so that people can share and commit together about certain values.
Thanks for these. And we, in the first conversations and announcements of this conference, there was this idea that the mentorship that Creative Mentorship does is not the same as academic mentorship. And there were references to how academic mentorship can be cruel and cold and too focused and so on. But it's really a privilege to have Milena here with us, who I think connects these worlds really well, and who I think is one of these exceptions to that rule, and one of the kind of persons who really kind of nurtures this culture of being a lifelong mentor if you ever were her student. There's this support and commitment and emails coming from her about different opportunities and so on. And I think it's really interesting, Milena, to ask you then about these differences of kind of what do people learn in mentorship in this kind of continuous, more focused way, the way Creative Mentorship does it. And you've been on the advisory board of Creative Mentorship, so you have quite a knowledge of that. What's different that mentorship offers for the field of culture that can't be gained at the university?
Oh, but there are, in fact, many things, because basically what university in normal circumstances is offering is knowledge transfer and certain rigidity in the way to enable mentees to achieve very defined, properly defined skills and so on, by validated already. So mentorship rarely, academic mentorship rarely allows going beyond even discipline, although we are speaking about transdisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity and so on, but in reality it's pretty focused, and each mentor is sticking on its own basic discipline. Something Masha mentioned about, like, define yourself in which field you are and you have to do it and so on. Of course, there are mentors that are not that rigid, but I'm speaking more generally about atmosphere, because that's what is expected. And I remember, for example, how difficult it was for me to find a mentor academic once upon a time. No one wanted to work with me. So, no, really. It's, so I was, for totally different reasons, at Faculty of Political Science, the potential mentor told me, look at my proposal, said, but you are not quoting classics of Marxism. And then I said, but they haven't written about socio-cultural animation, so why it should be quoted just as legitimization that you are Marxist. So I said goodbye, and so on. But it was basically like this, or you accept regulations, whatever. Now, on some other, for example, the very best potential mentor at that time was in Zagreb, from History of Art. And I addressed her by phone. And I presented myself. I found her at the cabinet where, okay. And I just wanted, doesn't matter even the name. Then I presented and I said I would like to come to Zagreb to speak with her about potential thesis and so on. So, what you are graduated? I said, Faculty of Dramatic Arts, that and that. There are 5 reasons why it cannot ever happen. First of all, you don't have a university degree. I said, I have. No, this is art academy, this is not university degree. From women who made first text about performance art, about kitsch, about exploring in Kalčićeva Street, and I was really enhanced by her text to go to apply. Second, assistant, because I presented myself as assistant of faculty, has to go and to do a PhD thesis with his or her professor at this department, at own school, and so on. And the 5th reason was, and I am fed up already with my doctoral students. I don't have time to invest anymore in mentorship and so on. But it was same, Faculty of Philosophy. No one wanted to work with me. We don't have sociology of culture. Anyway, I found excellent mentor at the philology faculty, Miloš Ilić, who was really supportive. He was always, I came literally from the street, knocking on the door. I am receiving Thursdays 2 to 4, and I came on Thursday without any. So he accepted me, then, not accepted, he said, come next Thursday and bring your texts and master thesis and so on. So it was academically, I'm too long in explaining. But what creative mentorship, that was your question, sorry for telling all the other things, is offering, is, in fact, it's more about personal development that is taking in account values of its own, of that person, to be developed further, enhanced, and so on, but taking in account also the situation, the context, the possibilities, the needs of environment, and so on. So it is a complex interaction, sometimes peer, sometimes intergenerational, because you don't select mentors on the basis of the age difference or maturity and so on. So it's a kind of, I said, energy transfer of ideas, initiatives, emotions, and that is also why it is so important for mentors, because it's a transaction. It's, yeah.
Thank you. But thank you also for this kind of journey to your own experiences with mentoring. Actually, we did want to frame this panel in a way that we talk about what mentorship does in culture, but that we talk about it from very personal experience, because this kind of personal is also kind of very relevant and also political in many ways. And Helen, your experiences with mentorship have been very diverse. And it will be nice to go back to that and what mentorship does in Sweden. But there is one particular story that we are really, kind of all of us have been inspired with, and that is Helen working at the Historical Museum as a curator 15 years ago. And then, through many different things, but mentorship included, she comes to Serbia as a cultural attaché at the Swedish embassy in Belgrade, and this is how a lot of us meet her. But actually, I'm interested in this. You had a mentor that was from a different sector, and that was mentoring you who were in culture in a way that could connect these two sectors. So what does mentorship do in culture when we get mentored by someone outside of our field?
Well, he was actually the one that approached me. He was a politician, actually, he was the statsminister, how do you? He was the prime minister of Sweden, and he had retired. And he was in many boards, different kind of boards, and there was a huge lack of women on these boards. And he had very few connection with young women. So he got in contact, and we were in the same big project. I was a curator for a big exhibition, and we got in contact regarding that exhibition. And then one day he asked me, "Can you please be my mentee?" I became his mentee for many, many years. And what he did, and he was from politics, and he had a lot of international relations and so on. But what he was able to do was to find things in me I didn't know was existing. So because he came from another field, so he posed completely different questions to me, and he stressed me, he challenged me in questions that was not on the table because I was working within culture. I was I was an exhibition curator. So he got me to understand more skills and also passions in my life, and that was the reason I applied for the job here in Serbia. I felt passion. I was here, I visited, I got to know a lot of very interesting people here in the beginning of the 20th century, right after the war, and I wanted to come back, and that's why I went. And he pushed me, he supported me, he kind of supported me to understand I was able. And I think that is something that mentorship is good. But he was not comfortable. You know, he was challenging me, and he posed these very uncomfortable questions. So
such as,
for example, I mean, he was posing questions. Oh, gee, I can't remember. But I remember that I was often very uncomfortable. Because I wanted to be in a safe space, and within my culture sphere, I was safe. I knew how to answer. But with him, I had to really, because he was not from the culture field, I had to explain and to formulate myself in a way for him to understand. And then he posed next very challenging question. And for me, mentorship is not something that is always comfortable. That is not the meaning of mentorship. To be uncomfortable can also be very, very crucial. But also to have this trust that this person that is your mentor believes in you and likes you and wants the best for you. I mean, that trust needs to be there. But uncomfortable situations can be very good. So that was the beginning, and then, of course, I have new mentors even today, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah. But, well, talking about the uncomfortable or kind of going out of your comfort zone, going out of your culture, even I was lucky to have a mentor that I think could also pose quite uncomfortable questions.
Yes.
And who was coming from a different... Culturally, in terms of their profession, they were more or less doing the same thing. He on a more managerial level than Ivana, but kind of working as the head of the British Cultural Center. Tony O'Brien, who was one of the mentors for years and years in Creative Mentorship, and is still at the advisory board and honorary board of Creative Mentorship. But there was this kind of, what does it mean for a cultural professional and for you working in this field in Serbia, to have someone mentoring you who was from another culture, another context? Like, what sort of dialogue happens there? What sort of challenges appear?
Before I answer that question, I wanted to refer to the few like impressions that we had during the introductory part, which is matchmaking. Because I'm sure that neither one of the members of the team in that process when I was selected for as one of the mentees remember now that in my application form, I asked for a mentor skilled in gamification in technology and usage of gamification techniques in culture sector. Actually, I remember Dragana calling me super excited to tell me that it's not going to be that topic that we're going to work on, but they were sure that they have a perfect mentor for me, and it was Tony O'Brien. At first, it was really a shock because I also felt I applied for the Creative Mentorship Program from the point of view of my association because I wanted to develop further projects within the association, and my role at the Cervantes Institute was in the back. That wasn't the idea, and I thought that initially I might have also some kind of conflict of interest because I did know Tony O'Brien previously because we were meeting regularly on unique cluster Serbia meetings, and I knew him. But I was wrong. I really was wrong, and that when it comes to the trust that Helen also just mentioned, that I said, okay, I'm sure that these girls know what they're doing. And if they say that's a good match, I might need, that they might read in my application form, that I might need different kind of support, not so technical, but more substantial, actually. So back to answer your question, as for the different background, different cultural background, I normally don't have a problem with that because I work on a daily basis with different cultures. And so it wasn't a thing, it wasn't a big thing for me, but I must acknowledge at this moment that when you have a foreign mentor, it also means that with the mentor it comes a whole backpack with him of his own cultural background, historical background, linguistic background, which is also can be an issue. I think that it's a huge advantage actually, because it requires you to be more open. It requires also a mentor to have a lot of flexibility and allow him as a mentee to get to know the local mentality and the local cultural tissue, which we necessarily were going to tackle in our process. That was a good thing that Tony was here at that moment for many years, so he did know that quite well. But I remember a lot of those cross-culture communications, which helped me a lot. And I'm going to give you examples, which I practice now and I didn't before. Which is, for example, something that's not natural to Serbians in our way of work. Tony likes to walk during the meeting. So we were walking during the meeting, and for me, yes, and talking, and I'm like a super student, you know, like taking notes and everything. So when we finish, from time, okay, now you can leave, and I'm going to stay for 20 more minutes, just, you know, to pause and have everything written. Another thing was, for example, the fact that he taught me that it's a great thing that if you go to a special meeting, that you always invite a colleague to go with you. And that helps you, you know, to reflect upon what was said and have like another mirror of what was said in the meeting. I said, okay, wow, okay, let's learn from that. And I can see Slavica communicating with me with eyes, because we also had, it also helped me during that year meeting him in other role, not as a mentor, but on the unique meetings, to applaud him for, you know, seeing in practice what he was preaching, in a way, now from the different angle. But I wanted to say that apart from the linguistic thing, it can be an issue. Being philologist in my case, it's not of any help, because I was at that moment also applied for the program, trying to define more precisely some super complicated circumstances I was in, and I was trying to name them in order to understand them better, you know. And I do speak English, as you can see, but in that level you are trying to find nuances and everything, and it made me also more flexible, you know, and more open to that. And as for the linguistic part, just one more thing. I just finished the mentoring program that I was mentoring 3 teams in public libraries this year in Italy and in Romania. And Italian girls doesn't speak English. One of them doesn't speak English. So I said, okay, I studied Italian at university. I never spoke since then, but you know, I speak Spanish. So we decided to be more flexible, and one of them was speaking in Italian, and I was answering in English. So you can also do that, just making them comfortable in that process, because the language barrier can also make additional distance we don't need in that mentorship process as well.
Thanks for this reflection, and thanks also for these very useful tips. I hope you have written them down or will remember them. Yeah, I think, well, since the very beginning, there was this feeling in creative mentorship that culture, and not culture as a kind of this big, monolithic, very diverse field, but culture as kind of small cultures within cultural field so often exist in bubbles. So kind of architects hang out with themselves, designers within themselves, musicians have their own ways, visual artists their own, producers their own, and so on. And there's very little interaction that happens unless you're together on some project and so on. But then even kind of wider than that, there's this kind of culture bubble, and we don't mix with politicians, and we don't mix with economists, for God's sake, and bankers and this and that. And that kind of what it does, there is oftentimes a very strong kind of spirit of kind of collectiveness and kind of joint purpose and so on. But there is very little space where we can kind of build bridges across sectors, across fields, and so on. And I think all of your stories really kind of testify to those kind of bridge making and what it takes to make bridges. It's quite uncomfortable, and it takes a long search, as in Milena's case, and so on, and some translation. And there's one very important bridge for us, and that has been the bridge between public cultural sector and independent cultural scene that oftentimes are presented in antagonizing manner, and that oftentimes are seen as, you know, these are traitors, and these are, you know, just have their own comfortable chair and don't have to work anything. So a lot of misconceptions and a lot of, yeah, just bad feelings that really kind of prohibit us from doing things collectively, kind of making bigger fronts, changing culture in more unexpected ways, and so on. And Nela, your experience with creative mentorship was exactly that bridge. At that moment, you were even thinking kind of, do I stay in public sector or do I go independent? And what's really there for me? Like, where do I find my place? And there was Slađana Petrović-Varagić as your mentor, who had both experiences in a sense. So can you tell us about how that was working?
For sure, I would love to tell you about that particular relationship between me and the mentor. And I would just refer to something that Helena said. Mentors should make you feel able, like you are able to do something. And Slađana made me feel like I'm not able to do something. And I will come back to that. I think it's also a very important thing, because when I approached creative mentorship, I actually wanted to get in touch with Slađana. And when I was asked about mentor, I said, yeah, Slađana would be an excellent choice. She was the director of the Cultural Center in Požega. She was one of the first directors in Serbia that actually lost that post due to political reasons. And I was expecting that to happen for me very soon in my career, being the director of the Contemporary Art Gallery in Subotica. But Slađana moved on to the independent cultural sector. And that was exactly my idea. Okay, so I don't make it as the director of the gallery in Subotica. Maybe I can, and I was already searching and scanning who could be the possible partners for this civil organization in Subotica. I was talking to friends, talking to other cultural field workers. And then this opportunity presented itself. And Slađana was really very patient with me. For 1 year, we worked together, talking endlessly, and trying to communicate also the very hard inner feelings that you have once you are dragged through the things that she was dragged through. And I was kind of hoping, well, it won't be really the same for me, but I might have these bad feelings, so I'm going to ensure that, okay, I get a map. Since I'm a very structured person, I really wanted to know in advance what is going to happen, what will my feelings be, and how will everything end. Will it work out fine? And yada, yada, yada. And then she really had the nerve to talk to me about everything, to kind of make me feel comfortable sensing my own discomfort. And at the end of this 1 year long process, she told me, okay, now I have a really scandalous idea, but I don't think you're made for independent culture. I don't think you just have the mind for it. You should remain, if I have a say as your mentor, you should remain in the institutional sector and you should bring the change there. It absolutely doesn't matter which office are you occupying at the time. You can be the change anywhere. And 7 years have passed since then. I moved on to a different post, and a lot of things happened there, and I moved back to Subotica. And Višnja said something, and I don't mean in any way to interrupt or to burden this conversation with bringing politics into it, but this sentence that Slađana told me, you can bring change anywhere you are. It doesn't matter what's your position. You can be the change, is something that encouraged me through life and really made me absolutely confident about the fact that it doesn't matter where are you standing. The only thing that matters is what are you talking about and what are you investing your life into. So for me, it was a very good experience being mentored by someone who knew the cultural sector from both sides, from both fields, and also made me very much aware of the fact that the institution in which I decided to remain, the institutional sector always has to provide a helping hand to the independent sector. There is no reasons why we shouldn't work together. And in the recent years, there have been some problems with that in the institution where I work. It's not easy for these new people that come to cultural institutions in Serbia to accept us as partners. But even having this experience with my mentor in mind, I always try to negotiate that we should work together because we are one culture, essentially, and we are doing the same thing from very different positions. But I also do have to add that the program and all the workshops and meeting all the people enabled me also to think about mentorship as something that can come from every side you look at. So I specifically remember Dragana saying, you can ask someone to be your mentor even when this program ends. And I thought, oh my, there have been mentors in my life previously. The only thing is that I didn't name them. I didn't recognize them, but now I do. And I do this thing every time I feel I need someone to help me either with a knowledge or a skill. I simply approach people And I say, okay, there's this one lady, Dragana, from Creative Mentorstvo. She told me that even later in life you can ask someone to be your mentor, and I do that very often. So it has really changed not only the way I look at my profession and my position in the profession, but also my life. Yeah, it has been a life-changing journey for me.
Thanks a lot, Nela, for this, and thanks a lot for underlining what we try to share constantly, and that is really, even a coffee situation is a good situation for mentoring, if you approach it that way, if you are focused, if you are centered on what you need and want to learn in that moment, or what another person needs, and can guide through kind of these open questions. So that's an important kind of takeaway. But also thank you for kind of bridging your personal experience to this idea of kind of where change happen in the fields of culture and how different sectors can work together. And maybe in this kind of round, now going back to Ivana, I'm curious kind of what is relationship with Tony? Like if you zoom out and see, okay, what did it mean to the cultural sector in Serbia, you being mentored through that process, or kind of the knowledge and skills gained?
I suppose that my wish to apply for the program is more or less the wish that all of the people filling in the application form have. I was in a challenging situation professionally at that moment, and Tony helped a lot with posing so many uncomfortable questions. That's what Helen said. At first, it was, as he said, no change can start from a comfortable conversation. That's the starting point. And I remember first time when we met for a coffee, for our first session, after I was explaining my whole projects, my ideas about my role in the culture sector in general and everything. And he said about some project that I said that are super important. He said, why are you so shy about that? And it was like, I am. Actually, I was. I think that, you know, like building our own capacities and making us encouraged by our mentors, that's what creative mentorship actually does. It strengthens the whole sector. And strengthening the whole cultural tissue also strengthens the society. It sounds like a bit of, you know, too utopist, but I think that it does actually. And during the introductory part, when you were speaking, this is a super busy week for me, and I came this morning from completely another project, and when I heard all of you, including Helen, speaking about the lack of future perspective and everything, I thought I was so overwhelmed emotionally that I said you should have, you know, given a pack of tissues with the registration kit. Because, yes, and I think that what we feel encouraged. And we feel, you know, confident, more confident, capable. Mentors help us also in a way that they are kind of mirror to us, which we often need. I was many times in the mentor role, but only once in mentee role. And I'm sure that being a mentee is the best thing you can, best role you can have, because there is a person and the whole team focused on your development. It's a so privileged situation, really.
Thanks for underlining this. And Helen, you mentioned you had so many experiences with mentoring, and of course, creative mentorship started as this kind of, well, we wanted to have more knowledge exchange and more this openness and trust in sharing knowledge in Serbia, and we really felt that this happens in Sweden on a regular basis, that it's so normal. Yeah, what do you see mentorship does in cultural sector in a society like Sweden, or what you personally have got from it throughout the years that you think is really important also structurally, motivationally, ethically for the sector?
Well, you know, the culture sector people are so vulnerable because you're creating new ideas. Most of the time you're creating new formats, you're creating new paths and so on. So you're pretty vulnerable as a culture worker. And especially if you're developing new things. And I think to have a mentor is a way of supporting that vulnerability. And I think perhaps in our sector that's more important than any other sector, I would say, because there are other systems that takes care of that. But that's for the culture. But I have to say something about Creative Mentorship Serbia. I mean, your organization, our organization, and that you all are part of. It's very special because what you have created is a network of support system, like you said as well. And that is something different because if you go to a mentorship program in Sweden, most of them, you're part of it for a year, and then you leave. But you have created something else. And as I understand, the support system ticks in. Even if you are an ex-mentor, you realize you can actually call someone to support you, and perhaps you found that person in this crowd. So I think that is something you should take care of. Especially now in our society, we need these kind of networks, not only this individual conversation that we have and you get this support, but also this networking and supporting each other as a network. I think that is so, so important. Also, I have to say, from my perspective, when it comes to artists and culture workers, is that we are change makers and we are also opposition. And we are also many times activists. I consider myself an activist, and also we are the voice, and we are persons that can design messages and a new path. And in I suppose all of you are living in a very peculiar situation. I think Sweden is definitely. I just finished my 4 years in United States, and I would say that United States, many people are living in a very precarious situation. So to understand that we are part of a very important group of people that can change society, that we have that power, that's very important. I want to add that.
Thanks for that. And I think Milena kind of trying to frame this from your perspective, this change that happens when cultural sector is supported and when this kind of vulnerability and being on the kind of creative seeding side of what happens in the society is supporting kind of
I think
what happens.
Here, this vulnerability is even multiplied for many reasons. The ones that you are mentioning are everywhere the same. It's linked to these different feelings of social injustice, of crisis in the world, and so on. But here you have this systemic insecurity. Even if you are working in, for example, National Theatre, the whole system is such that those that would like to contribute as change makers, they feel so many constraints and no support in local environment. Or contrary, the very moment someone gives some idea, wish to change, to contribute, the people around say, probably it's not the moment, let's rethink, and so on. So mentorship, even non-formal mentorship, is crucial, and that is something I would lobby for, that all of us act in everyday life as informal mentors, so as supporters, as someone who is endorsing this wish of colleagues to experiment, to try, even when we feel that maybe it's too early, maybe it's 80% that it's going to fail because of, and so on. And what also is very important, that this kind of, for example, the persons that I consider my informal mentors at my school, for example. Two of them were even never my teachers in regular courses, Ognjenka Milićević and Mira Trajlović. In fact, Mira Trajlović was dismissed the year when I entered the Faculty of Drama Arts because she was not, they found some stupid reason how she was not regular on classes as teacher and so on, which normally would never, for some others, was never the problem to keep on taking their position of professor and not delivering classes at the same time. But I think it's also important to have such a role models when and why, because of so many ethical dilemmas that we are facing today. In fact, the first thing I shared today with Iva Plemić when I entered was this ethical dilemma. How things are going as normally these days when our colleagues, our students, are on strike. And we are ignoring this strike instead of at least mentioning, discussing something, because the purpose of the strike is, and I've been in my life many times in situation that we started a strike and no one joined. We get compliments. The most awful was when we started the strike in 2000 in May, because the students of architecture were beaten and our colleagues from architecture, super that you are in strike and so on, and they didn't enter. We can't. It's not easy and so on. So, and yet then you feel this ethical dilemma. You put your students in situation not to have in June exams, for protesting for the students of architecture, and then no one else is in strike. So you are hurting your students because so that you have sentiment that I'm a very ethical person, I don't do this or that. And I think we need conversations, many conversations on such issues, because very often we can't find it in our everyday working environment. So this kind of a larger, I would say, professional community, a reflective community, community that think, and that you feel also trust, that you can share and discuss openly. So whatever we might all disagree in different ways, disagree about possible solutions, but at least that we can share opinions and discussion. And I think that for me, in fact, this kind of mentorship is extremely valuable to discuss professional ethics, which is basically rarely discussed at our universities at all, although, I mean, in law school they have this small about lawyers' ethics, or at medical school one lecture about Hippocrates oath and so on, but about a really, what does it mean to be professional? And so at least that is something that we can share among ourselves in a very kind of analytical, reflective, critical way.
Yeah, mentorship as a way to discuss personal ethics and as a way to kind of have this space for reflection. And I think this space for reflection has been coming on and on, not just so this reflection kind of collectively as a group, but also this reflection with oneself. And I think what you were pointing out to was a lot of this kind of trying to re-articulate yourself in front of someone who doesn't know you, and try to see how you feel with that, where you stand with that when someone else who is caring for you is observing. Yeah.
Thing. What I found also very inspirational today in the discussion with potential mentees. Yeah, it was opportunity to discuss about something which we can call institutional or cultural memory, which basically is forgotten. For example, for me, it was opportunity to discuss about independent editions of Slobodan Mašić, which was fantastic cultural endeavor during socialist Yugoslavia, but somehow even my students of Faculty of Applied Arts, designers, they never heard this generation never heard for Slobodan and Saveta Mašić, studio structure, and so on. So in this sense, mentorship is, but from them, I also heard a lot about different initiatives, contemporary initiatives that I missed for different reasons. So there is this, not only in a banal sense, transfer of information, but certain cultural memory of dissent, rebellion, which was, for example, I mentioned Slobodan Mašić, it was a fantastic example, never really written about it, of a rebellion against the law that prevented private publishing in Yugoslavia. And he became private publisher by making specific individual contracts with individual authors, because individual author as publisher was allowed for his own books, and so on. But this is something that should be studied, explored, transferred, discussed, and we are often forgetting about it.
And maybe just for the kind of last round, Helen, you had, or you are now in the situation of kind of thinking afresh, in a sense, what you want to do after so many kind of very high positions that you were occupying, and probably so many places where you could easily end up working. And how have these experiences of mentoring and being mentored help you cope with this uncertainty now, like not just in a bad sense, but also in this sense of kind of waiting for seeing where your path goes?
Well, you know, I've been living in the United States for 4 years, and that can be challenging. And what is actually, first of all, what is lacking? The lacking is that the meeting, like you say, Milena, the meeting between intergenerational meetings, but also meetings between people. I think that is something that I'm very much engaged with, also in the United States, and of course in Sweden. That's one thing. The other thing is, okay, how do we create these platforms or networks or labs that can provide answers for these huge topics we have in society, how to live together in the future? How shall we live together in the future? And I think the conversation starts one by one, but then it also spreading, and we get new mentors, and we get support, and we try, because what shall we do? I think that is, for me, the crucial issues right now is how can we live together in the future? May I tell you about my new mentor? Of course. Okay. I have a new mentor. Shortly, I have a new mentor. She's 35 years old. I'm 60. She's 35 years old. She's a theater director in New York. She's an expert in climate storytelling. I've been working with her for 4 years. And she is putting me on stage. I'm not a performer. I'm definitely not an actor. She's putting me on stage, making me very uncomfortable. And she says, you have to be there. You have something to say, and it has to be you that says it. You cannot run away from this. You just have to do it. So she's putting me on stage, and I have to perform, and I have to perform myself together with her. And she's fantastic. She's supporting me. She's taking care of me. She's making sure that I feel comfortable and I feel trust in myself to be able to do something so uncomfortable. So I'm trying to, I'm trying to find that people that can support me, and in the same time, I'm trying to find situations and people that I can support. That's it.
Great. Nela, maybe going back
Sure.
to you and then kind of ending this way. You have had quite challenging last 5 years or so, with many kind of unexpected situations, with this kind of self-proclaimed destiny or prophecy happening actually, and so on. And it was this moment that many have mentioned, this moment of vulnerability, but also a moment of kind of big support, and also standing not only for yourself, but really for the whole kind of public sector and professionalism in it, and being able to speak out, not hide in shame as many would like and wish, and so on. What can mentoring as a support in these situations do for the field of culture?
For me, this is a very easy answer, because I began by borrowing someone else's sentence. I'm not sure that it's the best way to end, by borrowing someone else's motto. But there was this motto of the International Museum Day on the year when we just ended, luckily, the coronavirus, and we all survived. And now the museums were like, what do we do? And the motto was rethink and reimagine. And for me, as much as this first part of it is important, rethink, you always have to think, but you have to reimagine, to imagine once again, to once again challenge yourself and to challenge the other one, the mentor, by asking these constant questions and then accepting the answer. It's not an easy thing to do. If you have a mentor, inevitably you will ask something and the mentor will tell it as it is. Now, are you able to accept it? You will be if you reimagine yourself, reimagine the sector, reimagine the connections. And when you were asking Professor Milena about what would culture look like if we had more mentorship, it would be changed forever. It would be such a good world to live in if we just in this country, to begin with, acted as mentees and mentors without sticking to our positions, like, oh, I am this 40-year-old curator, so when someone who is 25 years old shows up, then I have to say, oh, young people, they really don't know anything. They cannot teach me. They cannot bring anything to the table. Yes, everyone is invited to bring their ideas and their changes to the table, to our cultural institutions, and to this country. If we had more discussions, more talk, more conversations, more trust in each and every one of us, just to ask questions and just to receive answers, then the cultural field, in my view, would be changed forever. It would be a mostly welcomed change in this country. And every day I invite myself to bring that change. So the change never ends. For me, this is not only a forever sign, but change is something that happens on forever.
Thanks. Ivana, this is such a good ending, but you're the one that will end with the same, same answer, like what would cultural field look like if we would have more mentorship?
Well, I think that at least for me, in all my professional roles, I can easily identify culture as a common good. And starting from that point of common good, we can imagine easily sharing it and making it more visible, and making it not only more visible, but like a role model in a society. And having so little opportunities to have a non-formal education during our educational process, a regular one, that makes creative mentorship and the mentorship as a concept even more important. I think that everyone that get through this creative mentorship process and now takes part in the alumni network, as Dragana said, more than 300 people, they are also ambassadors of the idea. And it's something that is like a huge impact that can have on this society. And I would stay with that, converting vulnerability that Helen mentioned so so great into a strength, actually. We feel more powerful. Because we can also recognize the network of this like-thinking people. We can visualize the network, actually.
Thank you. And maybe to conclude with, you heard so many kind of opposites in kind of what we shared today. Opposites in the sense of kind of accepting vulnerability, but also kind of taking the position of strength and kind of empowerment in that kind of place of vulnerability, but then also kind of being like a parent, but also making you uncomfortable, like support and discomfort. And there's a lot of those kind of things that we usually see as oppositions that we actually need to kind of embrace in our own ways of navigating the world, both in the cultural field, but then also in how we live together. That really having conversations with strangers, with different people, with people on different positions, different age groups, and so on, really does bring to someone's life. Thank you for being part of this debate. This has been part of Creative Mentorship Talks. There's more talks online. This one will be filmed, so maybe if you found this inspiring, it's good also to go and check out the YouTube channel of Creative Mentorship. But also really stay with us after lunch. Now there's going to be time for lunch for 1 hour. And then we have sessions dedicated to new possibilities and new opportunities of working with culture. A lot of our dear kind of partners and donors and sponsors and so on will be here to share what's the spaces, grants, projects, connections that they can share and kind of make available. So it's a good way to really get to know what is going on. Also hear about a few mentoring projects and processes, not only Creative Mentorship, which now has the open call, but also partnering mentoring programs that we work with. So thank you a lot. Thank you a lot for really, really inspiring messages and for hopeful messages. And yeah, see you on the break and after the break.